Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming along. My name's Simon Benson. I'm the Director of the Immersive Technology Group for Sony Interactive Entertainment. Most of you will probably know our product more as PlayStation Virtual Reality is what I'll be talking about today. So today's presentation I've called PlayStation Virtual Reality, Bringing Immersive Entertainment into the Home, because that's specifically about virtual reality has been around for a very long time, really. Now it's coming into the consumer space. That's really what I'm going to be talking about most. To give you a bit of background on myself, so way back when I started my career, over 20 years ago, I actually started in military R&D, where I worked with high-end virtual reality, augmented reality, stereoscopic displays, all manner of things when it was just incredibly expensive, but still actually pretty good. It was viable technology back then. Probably the biggest weakness was more or less the tracking, but apart from that, the technology was actually very good. And we used that for R&D projects, we used it for simulators, we had relationships with major Formula One racing teams at the time where we did simulators for them, all very professional, high-end stuff that has actually been in use ever since. So people think about in the 90s saying that virtual reality disappeared. That's not really the case. It disappeared from the consumer perspective, but it's actually been going for a very long time, very successfully in industry, but just for people who could afford it because it was very, very expensive. So that's where I started my career. I then moved on and moved into the games industry, where I've been there for like nearly 18 years now. Again, doing more simulator-related things, so driving games and things like that. But then what we did, we took technology that we'd learnt from our past, thinking, actually, this is really cool stuff that we've seen. We knew how valuable it could be and how much more immersive it could make things. And we looked at applying that to gaming. So we were the first team to make a 3D game, for example, on PlayStation 3 at the time. And then we were instrumental in helping the whole rollout of 3D gaming on PlayStation 3. And I was actually here a few years ago doing a presentation on PlayStation 3D a very long time ago. But we always said at the time that 3D was a really important stepping stone, that when you think about the ultimate vision of the most immersive gaming, people always think about the Star Trek holodeck where anything could happen. It's just a magical room where you could just be in a new reality and it's totally believable. But one aspect of that is 3D is essential. 3D, accurately calibrated so that you totally believe it, is an essential component of that. And we were saying that many, many years ago. And my team then went on to pioneer virtual reality for PlayStation. So I was one of the original founders of PlayStation VR. And we stayed with that technology ever since. So I've probably worked in every element of virtual reality for PlayStation as it currently stands. And I hope to share some of that knowledge with you today. So just to give you a breakdown of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'll start off talking about what really the media of virtual reality actually is. Just a few examples there, just to put it into a bit of a context. Then I'm going to talk about PlayStation VR itself, and again, mainly focusing on this idea of making it a consumer device and what's important about that, what features were important for the system and why. I'll then show you a few of our VR games, and what I've done, I've tried to select ones that are more appropriate for an audience that are coming at this from more of a TV and film background rather than the gaming background. So just a few games that I chose there. And then I'll talk about the media channels that we have on PlayStation VR and some of the non-game things that are already going on our platform. And finally, I'll just talk about some future opportunities, again, more tailored towards the TV production side of things and things like that. So let's start off with the new media of virtual reality. So a lot of you are probably familiar with what virtual reality actually is, but I just wanted to start off from a basic level just for everyone, just as a good starting point, really. So I think we all accept that TV content can be very immersive. The idea of having something on our screens that we watch, we can get very absorbed in that. That's an absolute given. Equally, you can get absorbed in a book, and you can find books very immersive too. But what's really happening there is it requires us to have a level of engagement with the content and be focused on it, and then allow our imaginations to fill in the blanks and to remove the idea of it being on a boarded screen. It just takes that away from our minds, because our imagination kicks in. And that's what helps us have immersive experiences. Virtual reality is very different, though. In virtual reality, there is no sense of a screen already, and what's actually happening is you put the headset on, and it's stimulating our senses in a way that it's used to being stimulated to accept a reality. So, for example, our vision has the perfect 3D images. It's with our head, as we move around, you get the room responds, and it stays locked in space. The 3D sound, it all goes together to stimulate our senses, to mean that we don't have to engage our imagination. So one example of that could be, if I put a virtual reality headset on and it faded up from black and I found myself on the edge of a cliff, instinctively, I'd get vertigo, or I'd step back, or I'd have the fear of that space in front of me. I wouldn't have to think about that. I wouldn't have to get immersed in that content. That would just happen because I'm not having to engage my imagination at all. My body is totally convinced, because my senses are stimulated correctly, that this world is a real world. So that creates us some really interesting content differences now. So one is that when you think about creating content for virtual reality, really, I like to say it's sort of a bit more like theatre than movies. But it's an unusual theatre. It's a theatre of one person. That's you as the user. You're sat there in your virtual reality headset. You're monopolising this performance. The whole performance is there just for you. You're the only member of the audience. And when you think about what some of this might mean, as with any theatre performance, typically, if there are lots of actors on the stage performing some theatre production, you can't guarantee where all your audience are looking at any given time. So no one actually gets to stop acting. They're acting while they're visible all the time. And that's the same in virtual reality. You have some content where the player's in the middle of that content. The whole scene has to be tangible at all times. So if I turn around and look over my shoulder, things should still be going on behind me correctly. You can't just pause it. You can't just remove it. It has to be there. So you lose control of focusing in on a particular element. You just have to accept it's more like a theatre type production, if you like, but you have this audience of one. That then gives you some opportunities, though, because, for example, you have this audience of one, so you can directly address them, you can make eye contact with them, you can perform just to them, you can bring all the performance around them and make it much more intimate, much more special for that person, and then it becomes much more immersive. It's like the best theatre performance ever, you know, because you've got a complete monopoly over the entire performance as the viewer. And also, you can take it further still. You can invade their personal space. You can really engage with the player now. But this also brings along some other important points to consider. Fears and phobias can be very real, and this audience of one that you have, you don't necessarily know what their fears and phobias are. Someone could be quite a brave person. If something threatened them, they might be likely to want to stand up and threaten back, or they might cower away from it, or they might want to exit the experience altogether. You know, you might put things in your content deliberately, like you might think, oh, I want a scare moment, so I'll show a spider to the player. But maybe they're not scared of spiders at all, or maybe they're terrified of spiders. So this whole area, you've got to really think about what your audience is and how far you can push things in terms of the reactions that you want to get. Because again, it's not engagement of imagination. The person who's having this experience can totally believe this reality. So anything that you do show, they'll react based on them as a person, and they're an individual, and you don't necessarily know the makeup of that individual. Sometimes in games, we actually have options in there. For example, we might actually, early on in the game, ask a few questions to the player and get them to give us a clue about what they are and aren't afraid of and what level, what type of person they are, so we can actually tailor the content when we're ready for it. We want to do a jump, we know what they're more likely to jump at, and we can actually do that deliberately as part of a narrative game flow. But again, rather than being an audience member with virtual reality, you can actually put them right in the middle of the action. You can have them as a key figure in your performance as well, in the whole content now, in the narrative. They can be a really key part of that. And that's really where the power of virtual reality really comes into play, and the immersion and the interaction and all the value goes right up through the roof. But again, this is an interesting one too, because if you have a strong narrative that's very important and you make this person the main character, for example, how can you guarantee they're going to drive the narrative in the direction you want? Because again, they might be a brave person, they might be a shy person, they might be cautious, they might be gung-ho, you don't really know. So that element can make it very difficult to let them lead the dialogue. So often we're finding that, particularly in games, there's a few techniques that can be used for that. Like, for example, I sometimes say they're more like Robin than Batman, if you like. You know, you have a stronger character who's there to lead the dialogue, but they always throw things open to the player. So it's like they say, right, we're going to do this now, but can you do this bit for me? And they actually keep constrain the ability of the user's influence on the dialogue, whereas the main character can drive the narrative then as a non-game character, if you like, whereas the user is more of a secondary character, more of a rookie than the lead, you know, more Chewbacca than Han Solo kind of thing. Also with virtual reality, you've got this amazing ability to interact with the scene as well. So we've talked about how you exist within the scene, but also there's this magical space around you, you know, maybe a few meters around the player, things that they can reach out and touch, and the whole world becomes alive if you allow that to actually interact. So, for example, in this title here that we have, You can see you're inside a van here. Well, actually, in the van, everything works. You can mess with the fans, you can mess with the radio, you can mess with the sun visor, you can open the door, wind the window down, whatever you want. And that feels absolutely magical and just reinforces the realism of the space that you're in and makes the whole experience feel so much more valuable. The minute you try and do something and it doesn't respond, that lets it down and almost the reality starts crumbling down rather than building up. So it's important that you make use of this interactive space. But again, with interaction comes complexities. For example, if this was a strong narrative-based story that we're in here, and this is my driver, you know, we're in a shootout, I'm shooting the bad guys, he's driving along. Well, what happens if I shoot him? What happens if I shoot myself in the leg by accident? You know, how do I make the narrative evolve around that diversion that's suddenly gone in there that wasn't supposed to happen or wasn't what we expected when we were putting the dialogue plans together? And again, that's an area that game teams are very familiar with. They deal with this kind of thing all the time, so they've got methods that they put in place to deal with that whilst maintaining this level of belief, but managing the situations where you're trying to take it somewhere where the narrative shouldn't go. The whole area is a huge topic, so I'm not going into that in detail for today's presentation, but you know, that's a well-solved problem in games anyway. So overall, the message really about virtual reality content is it's very, very different. It's very different to most conventional content that we create. It's probably got more in common with games, but it's still different again from games. It adds a whole new level when it comes to this level of immersion and things like that. So a huge topic in its own right, and again, not something I'll go into now, but I just wanted to give you a flavour of that just as a foundation. So that brings me to my next point, which was PlayStation VR itself. So here's an image of PlayStation virtual reality. You can see it's quite different to most other headsets on the market. You know, it's different design and things like that. We're quite pleased with the design and the style of it all. And again, designed specifically for targeting consumers. And for PlayStation, we really think of that as a very broad spectrum of people, which I'll come to in a second. But I want to start off really with saying why virtual reality? Why did Sony Interactive Entertainment choose to do virtual reality in the first place? So the reason why really is that from a gaming perspective, we'd always been creating a vast array of different types of gaming experiences, all sorts of styles. We've got styles like this which couldn't exist in the real world, quite artistic and stylized, things that maybe look very realistic but are futuristic. So it's like a place that doesn't really exist but is very tangible. Realistic looking worlds, stylized rendering, futuristic things, other types of art styles that again don't exist in the real world. We've been creating these worlds all the time in conventional gaming, and the idea of now allowing people to actually step foot in these places like virtual tourism and be there in the middle of these amazing game worlds is phenomenal, and we just knew fully that our game audience would just embrace this very, very well and say, all my favourite gaming experience I've ever had, if I imagine I could actually have been there. It's like going on some sort of amazing theme park that's just specifically about your favourite game, but you could have that multiple times in the same day in the comfort of your own living room. That's the reason we really wanted to do virtual reality in the first place. And again, I was talking before about the typical environment for PlayStation. We were saying that this is about bringing virtual reality into the home. And for PlayStation, that's quite different to many other VR solutions, because if you associate your virtual reality headset with a PC, they often find it's in, you know, a room or whatever, an office type space, or it's at a desk. Whereas PlayStation's always really been about being in the centre of the home, typically connected to probably the best TV you've got in the house, in a room that's actually also used for socialising, where your family often gather. And that's really what we've thought about when we designed PlayStation VR, was designing with that in mind, designing with that environment in mind, and making it a very shareable device that's suitable for all. And because of this space where we find PlayStation 4 often in the home, in the centre of the home, it really means that our audience isn't just the same type of person. It's just like a mid-20s gamer who just plays nothing but games all the time. It's actually the whole family get engaged with PlayStation. So, you know, we find that parents, even grandparents, children, male, female, it doesn't matter. There's such a broad spectrum of PlayStation users out there that, again, we wanted to make sure that we designed PlayStation to cover that entire multitude of different types of people. So there's something for everybody. Also thinking about the diversity of our audience and about the skills, for example, they're not all core gamers who know how to do everything with PlayStation virtual reality and PlayStation 4 itself. Some people, you know, just have entry-level technical skills and things like that. So it was important that we made it very easy for people to connect. So there's no drivers involved. You literally just plug the headset into your PlayStation 4 with very simple instructions, and it just all works. If something's not quite right, there's big helpers all over the screen saying, oh, you've not connected this cable properly. And it just walks people through. It makes it incredibly simple. And that was a really, really important area, and a lot of effort went into getting that just right, so that we knew full well that everyone should be able to enjoy virtual reality with like no barrier to entry, or a very minimal barrier to entry. And also for that, the ergonomics of the headset was an important aspect. Now, in reality, even though virtual reality headsets are so incredibly technically complex, by far the biggest problem that we found on the project, the biggest challenge overall, was the ergonomics. Trying to make one-size-fits-all headset that people could intuitively fit for something that they've never owned anything like it in their lives before was a huge challenge. So we put a lot of emphasis into that, and we're very pleased with where we ended up. So we have a simple mechanism. You just literally pull it apart, put it over your head, let go, and it's on. It automatically tightens itself. It's just elasticated. There's an adjuster if you want to tighten up more at the back or whatever. It's a bit like a cycle helmet, so people have got that reference for that mechanism. And the other element we have is, if you wear glasses, you can pull the scope forward a bit to accommodate your glasses. So it makes it very simple, makes it easy for people to pass it around. Again, in thinking about that living room, if loads of people in the living room want to play it, they can take turns. You can just pass it to the next person. They can easily put it on without having to adjust anything. It's just natural. If they wear glasses, they don't have to take them off. So it's very simple and fits with that whole environment about pass and play, easy sharing, one size fits all, and works very well for that. We also have very advanced optics, probably the most advanced optics on any virtual reality headset I've ever come across. We're lucky enough that we actually have a whole team of specialists at Sony who make optics for all sorts of things, from cinema projectors, high-end production cameras, consumer cameras, you know, a multitude of different applications. So we had lots of expertise in this area. And what we wanted to really achieve was having optics that required no adjustment whatsoever. Because personally, I have this feeling that most people who try virtual reality, they're new to it. Probably nobody, even if you've owned a virtual reality headset for a while, probably nobody knows how to actually calibrate optics on a head-mounted display, because people don't necessarily know what good looks like, they don't know what right feels like. It's a whole new thing. So we wanted no adjustment whatsoever. So we just designed the optics so they were very tolerant to a wide range of distance between our eyes, and that put a lot of effort went into that, but I think that was the best way forward. And it also accommodates glasses, which is another major element, because again, people wear medical glasses because it corrects the vision. So if you're asking them to take it off, they then have to make the optics do the work, which is an even more complex problem. So that's how we design the optics, and I think that works out pretty well. Inside the headset, we have a 120 hertz OLED display. Obviously, you're probably familiar with OLED, very, very good color representation, which obviously helps with the whole immersion, let's say, makes the image quality better. But one of the key points really was the fact that it's 120 frames per second. The reason why that's important is, as we're trying to convince people who are in a virtual world, actually you can move your head around pretty quickly. And it's actually keeping up with the head movement and always representing an image that's exactly where your head is moving is the critical factor in making sure that you feel connected to that world. And it's actually the highest frame rate display on any consumer headset as well. For the tracking solution, so what we do for tracking is we actually use the PlayStation camera, which is this. This is a stereoscopic high-definition camera, so 2 HD lenses on that. Sits on top of your TV typically. They've been available since PlayStation 4 first launched, and they've been used for social reasons, all that kind of stuff. So it's a device that was already available to many people, and a lot of people already owned them. And then what we do is we use the optical side to track the lights on the headset. But we've also got a range of other controllers. This is the standard DualShock 4 that comes with the PlayStation 4. We've got the aim controller, and we've got the move controllers. So I'll just show you quickly these in a bit of context. So this is PlayStation VR when people wear it, so that's how it looks when it's worn. You can see quite a simple fit really. And again, the camera tracks the lights on the front. This is the DualShock 4, so in use here, you can see it has this bar on the front that actually lights up. And again, the camera tracks that as well. The PlayStation Move, so typically you use a pair of these, one in each hand. And they've got these big glowing balls on the end, which again, the camera tracks those, so it knows exactly where they are. And again, you can see there's triggers on the back, and you find when people use it in virtual reality, most people just literally just use just the trigger and maybe a button on top, so maybe just 2 buttons at most, and just ignore the rest of the buttons because it keeps it nice and simple and intuitive. But having 2 hands in the world makes a huge difference. And that's an optional upgrade on the system, so you don't need that. You can just use the PlayStation DualShock 4, which comes with every system, and everyone's got one of them if you want tracked games, or you can buy these if you want an upgrade. And finally, the PlayStation VR aim controller. So again, similar technology uses this glowing ball on the end, but this one allows you to represent different devices that fit that form factor. For example, obviously very popular as a gun peripheral. Equally, people use it as hoses and things like fire hoses, because it's a nice generic looking device, can do different purposes. And one advantage is because the camera's tracking all these devices at any given time, you don't have to calibrate anything. They all know where the camera knows where they are relative to each other by default, so there's no calibration process required at all. On the audio side, having an integrated microphone was an important step. Now, obviously, you'd think for gaming, that's really used for voice chat and online communications, and that's how you talk to people, and that's just a utility feature. But in actual fact, it's also an immersive feature. Many of our single-player games use the microphone for maybe if you walk up to a cave or something like that, you could shout hello into the cave and you hear it echo back from the environment, your own voice coming back with the environmental effects applied to it. And it just adds so much immersion to that world. It just makes you truly believe it, because everything you throw at this virtual world to try and break the reality of it, it actually gives you back as a real element and really makes you trust this reality that's being presented to you. There's a flexible audio solution as well. What we do here is, if for the ultimate experience you wear headphones, then you get full 3D audio. Now what that really means is, we're used to things like surround sound audio, which is typically on a plane around us. You have speakers around you just on a flat plane. Whereas 3D audio allows you to place virtual speakers anywhere. So you can have them above your head, you can have them below your feet, you can have them at any given distance. So what it does, it creates a true soundscape, which is just the way that our human ears work. And that works brilliantly for VR experiences where maybe you hear a noise going over there and you can turn your head and look, and then the noise goes over there and you can turn your head and look and you see the item. So it really fits together brilliantly with the idea of head tracking. And social VR, sorry, I'll just go back to the previous slide and mention the other points. So that's the headphones. The other audio option you have is not wearing the headphones. If you're doing something, like we said before, where you're in the living room, for example, you might want to share that audio experience with everyone else in the room. They might want to listen, follow along with the story and allow you to talk to them and things like that as well. Because for PlayStation, it's always been important for us to make sure that we always consider sharing as a key principle of our platform, really, one of our key foundations. So allowing the audio to be shared across the room is quite an important feature for us. And that really brings us on to social VR. So I said before about this space where everyone's sharing, and again, that's where the audio comes in. If I was playing a game in this room and other people wanted to know what was going on, letting them have that audio is actually quite a useful thing too. So we actually put some specific features in to support this social space as well. We have one called mirroring mode. Now what this one does is, imagine this is me and two friends on the sofa. I'm playing in virtual reality here, so that I see a special view in my headset, which is a wide field of view, stereoscopic view. The aspect ratio is actually even on both axes, not like a 16:9 image and things like that. So it's tailored for the virtual reality headset, basically. So I see that view, I can see these characters. But what we then do is we process that image and put something that fits a 16:9 TV on the TV screen. So everyone else in the room can see that too. And the reason that's important is, imagine we were playing an adventure game where there's a story and my friends are sat with me. Well, they can help me with the plot. Maybe there's a puzzle that I can't solve and they can say, well, actually, I think you saw something over in this corner. Maybe if we go back and do that. And they can follow the dialogue and know where the story's up to, which means we can take turns. I could simply pass my headset to the next person. They know where the story's up to. They know what's been going on. And it makes it easy to share that game in a single-player sense, just as you would if you were just passing a controller around. But then we took it a step further and said, well, maybe we could do something a bit more interesting with this. So we've got something else called separate screen mode. Now, in this case, I'm here on my sofa playing in virtual reality. I'm seeing this view. But my friends are now joining in too. So we've just got the one PlayStation 4. They've got a controller each. And now they're seeing this view, which is completely different to my view. So in this case, I am this monster. I'm doing this. I'm looking down at these guys. So in my view, I see them from this perspective, and there's me on my TV screen. So I can see that view. But they see me like this as more of like a normal game. And they're playing these characters. So they can play it like a normal game, but we're in the same world represented on the single console. We've got our different perspectives on it which match the environment that we're in. And that's a great feature for, you could think how you could use that feature for even TV content. Imagine I was doing something where maybe I'm in virtual reality controlling a sporting event, a live sporting event, and I can draw up statistics and information. and I can choose what the rest of my friends in the room see by me looking after that. I almost become like an outside broadcast truck function or a DJ or something like that. You know, I have a function where I can add value and socialise with my friends and give them value back by sharing it on this extra screen. And finally, the last part of the social side is the online VR. Now, this is a really huge area. So we talked about social in the living room and this local multiplayer, but overall, when it comes to things like PlayStation and gaming, you think about the benefits of remote multiplayer, playing online. Now, in virtual reality, this is really different again, because when you're playing normal online games, your friends are just a voice in your head. That's all you get, a voice in the middle of your head, disembodied. So it's kind of like, it's not really, not even the same as having a phone call, really, because you're distracted by the gaming on the TV and you're just getting the voice in your head, sometimes 3 or 4 people all at once talking at the same time. But when it comes to virtual reality, what you can actually do is you can share this virtual space now with your real friends. So, for example, I could be playing a game where I'm driving a car. My friends sat at the side of me, they're represented an avatar. I turn to look at them, they turn to look at me. We know when we're making eye contact. We naturally look at each other when we talk. Our mouths animate as we talk. The voice comes from their mouth. I can use hand gestures. They can say over there and they can point. You know, and the body language is amazing when you see virtual reality of someone where they're just represented by their hands and their head location, how you can recognise that individual just through the body language. It's quite amazing. But you actually remember, and when you think about the time you played a game together in virtual reality remotely, you almost remember it like they were with you, physically with you. That's the way you recall it. You know, you don't think of them being 200 miles away. You think we were in that same room together. That's how the memory comes back to you, which is quite amazing and totally different to existing online play. Again, with the console, thinking about this consumer market and the sort of target we were focusing on, our console itself's quite low cost, €299 for the console. So it was important for us to keep our headset cost down as well. So we're actually the lowest cost virtual reality system at the high end on the market altogether. So, and that was a really important thing. It fits with our consumer base, really, this idea about bringing it into the home, making it affordable, making it feel like a PlayStation product. But also we have a new product that came out just before Christmas, the PlayStation Pro. For people who want an enhanced experience, they can actually now buy a new version of PlayStation 4, which has got twice the graphical performance, which enhances the virtual reality even further. But that's not compulsory. PlayStation Virtual Reality works on every PlayStation console ever sold since launch. And to put that into context for you, so far we've got over 53 million PlayStation 4s out there, and growing all the time. It's really selling very well, most popular console in the world. And after 4 months of sale, because PlayStation VR has not been on the market for very long, we're approaching the 1 million unit mark, so doing very well. But actually, we're very much supply constrained. We're just selling out across the board. Typically, PlayStation VR, if you go on Amazon, you're seeing we're getting 4.5, 5-star ratings across the board. Been very, very popular, but it just sells out so quickly. So we're just upping production at the moment, so hopefully we'll see a bit of a transformation there and get even more out there into the market. So now I'll just show you a few of our VR games. So again, to give you a context, in the few months that PlayStation VR has been out, we've now already got over 100 virtual reality titles on the market, some of which are actually non-game related as well, but I'll come to them in a second. But there's just a sample of some of them, and it's growing all the time. We've got hundreds more in production, so there's a huge, huge demand from the content creation side to be PlayStation developers. People are just queuing up, wanting to make virtual reality content. They really do see it as this huge area of opportunity. So there's no shortage of content as it currently stands. So that's just a quick taster of just a few of the games, just to give you a bit of an idea. But now what I wanted to do was focus in on a handful of them, just to give you a bit more of a focus on some of these experiences. So the first game I want to talk about was Farpoint. So this one uses this aim controller, as you can see here, and is due for release imminently. What this game is about is kind of like a very narrative-driven, interactive story, if you like. You find yourself stranded on this alien planet, you don't know what to expect, and obviously you're experiencing it in virtual reality. So you are a virtual reality tourist, if you like, in this new world. And you encounter all sorts of things in this world, and it's got like this story, and you'll see in the video I'm about to show you, the way the story is driven often is by use of radio in the headset, for example. So you're alone, or not alone, you've got other people in this space with you, but it's all being driven through the head comms. That's how we drive the narrative of the whole story. Another one I wanted to talk about was VR World. So VR World is actually a package of several games, but the one I wanted to focus on first was this one, which is the London Heist. This was probably the most popular game at PlayStation VR launch, and it was basically you're in a criminal underworld, you're like a gangster type person associated with other gangsters, and your job was to steal a diamond and basically survive the whole unfolding story that surrounds that. I just wanted to talk over a few of the key mechanics. So in this game here, there was several different elements to this. For example, you experience as a VR player an interrogation where you're being interrogated, where we use a lot of these theatrical type things where people come right up to you in your face, they threaten you, they do all sorts of things like that. And we use tricks like, for example, there was a sign off to the right where it says exit. It's like this fire exit sign that's illuminated. And as you're being interrogated, if you actually look at it, we detect that you've looked at it using where your head's pointing. And then the character that's interrogating you notices that and reacts to that. It's like, makes a sign like, oh, you think you're getting out of here, do you? And he shoots the sign out, you know. And as a player, you're kind of like, they're reading my mind. How does this game know what my intention was at that point in time? So there's all these little tricks that you can use to really bring the game world alive and make this character's interaction with you a much more personal thing, just from very simple mechanics that you can use by just understanding where the player's looking, for example. But I'll just show you a few quick elements of this in video and just talk over them. So in this sequence here, this is one where you're inside the van, and again, you're shooting the bad guys. This is one where there's lots of action, not much narrative going on here, but again, you're having to reload the gun and things like that yourself manually. And this shows some of the depth of what you can do with the interaction. So now you're burgling the place, looking for this diamond, and you can see the amount of interaction you can do, bringing this world alive. That you don't have to pick up cigars and open cigar boxes to make the story unfold. It makes the world feel so much more real. And then when the shooting does start, you can actually use this thing as cover. You can hide behind it. And that's kind of all play that just kind of evolves, that players just do naturally, and you don't really have to instruct them on that. They just, you know, you can stand them in front of this area, and they just instinctively start opening drawers and looking through them and finding a flashlight and then shining it in it and all sorts of things like that. And you know, but they find it so much more immersive from the fact that you've just given them something that's tangible and real, and they can almost make the story up themselves. But we know how that story progresses, because sooner or later people are going to come in and start shooting, so they have to have found the gun and the ammo, and if they haven't, then they'll pretty much soon figure out that's what they need to be doing. But we've given them a lot of flexibility in what they can do within that space before that event starts. So another game I wanted to point out as well was one called Tumble VR, so a very, very different type of game here. This is more like a game show type thing, if you like, where you're set logic problems and you're actually having to use interaction by building up these towers and trying to get them to balance based on all the different types of blocks that are available to you with different properties. But it's a real sort of logic-based thing and things like that as well, where it's all focused on the interaction, so no real narrative to that. But you can see how it equates quite closely to things like game show type content and things like that as well. And there's a lot of these type of puzzle stroke skill-based things that involve this deep interaction as well that are available to on the PlayStation platform. Another element of VR worlds that I wanted to talk about was one we call Ocean Descent. So this one was a bit of an experiment from our part, because we put it in this package of other games that came together, about 5 different games in the VR Worlds package. But this one was really not a game at all. There was no score, there was no reason to do anything. It was more of just an experience. It was, you know, a dive cage. You just go in there and you can experience a variety of different things. So I'll quickly show you a video of this. So when it started off, we put you at this reef level where it's all nice and bright and the cage isn't moving, and that was deliberate to allow you to acclimatise to the environment, really, get used to VR. It's a really good entry point for people who've never tried VR before. Everything's nice and peaceful, you know, and they get to experience all this stuff nice and comfortably. Because even for people who, as you can see now, the dive cage actually moves, so you start going down. And for some people, that's quite a lot to take on all of a sudden, so that's why we let them acclimatise first. But once it does get down to the bottom, you encounter a shark. And as I mentioned before about phobias, some people don't like sharks, as you can probably imagine, particularly ones that are of this sort of scale, because this is about, I don't know, 20 metres long or something, and not particularly friendly shark. So what we actually did at the beginning of the experience, you got to choose what type of dive you wanted, and we were very clear that one of them involved a shark, and you could choose not to do that. And that was really important to be upfront about it, because particularly when we used this piece of content in the context of VR Worlds, it was kind of used as an entry point for people to say, look, if you've never tried VR, then start here, try this first. We knew it was very comfortable. It got people into the virtual reality experience, but we didn't want to shock them with something they didn't expect. So we made it very clear up front so they knew what they were getting into. And that really helped and let people make that choice. To be honest, most people love the shark and tend to, you know, you see a lot of videos on YouTube of people screaming and all the rest of it when it attacks and things like that, but actually really enjoying it, very much theme park-like. But the reason I put that one on there actually was because, like I say, it wasn't really a game. It was kind of our first test of something that's non-game and see how gamers received that, and it was received exceptionally positively. I think people just accept that, you know what, virtual reality is great for just having amazing experiences, whether they be games, whether they be high level of interaction, or whether they be quite passive in that regard. But if it's a tangible, realistic experience that you can go and talk to your mates about, it's just high value anyway, regardless of what it is. So that leads me on to the non-game topic, really. So I'll talk a bit about the media channels we have now already in the non-game area. So we have a few features as well that go beyond gaming. For example, we have something called cinematic mode. Now what this does is, even if you're not playing virtual reality content, I can plug my headset, my VR headset, into the PlayStation 4, and everything that I view on PlayStation 4, I have on a huge virtual screen. So it appears on my TV too, but I get this huge virtual screen in front of me. So it could just be a great way to play any game, it could be a great way to watch Netflix or other video services, or whatever it would be. It's just amazing to feel like you own the best TV in the world just because you bought a PlayStation VR, even though you might be sat in a very small room with a tiny real TV, you can have this amazing screen. So that was just a little support feature that we have in there. But also recently we updated our 3D Blu-ray player. So now you can watch 3D Blu-rays on an enormous virtual reality screen as well. Sorry, an enormous screen in virtual reality too, but obviously in full stereoscopic 3D. And obviously with the quality of the OLED, that makes that a great experience, but also the fact that there's absolutely no crosstalk because you're getting a different image for each eye and there's no filtering going on. So it's a zero crosstalk. It's the best quality 3D experience you can probably get in that regard. And again, just as a side feature of PlayStation Virtual Reality. We have a media player on PlayStation 4 as well, which is fully VR compatible. That allows you to play 360 images or 360 videos. And again, you can download them off the internet on USB sticks and do it that way, or other ways if you prefer. But that just allows you to play that kind of content. So you can see there quite a wide variety of things already on PlayStation, and we're only at the very beginning of what we're doing with PlayStation, particularly the non-game side of things, because we only launched at the tail end of last year. So it's very, very early days yet, but already lots and lots of interesting things going on there. Wanted to point out a few of those individual things now that maybe whiz by on that show reel. So one is we have quite a few 360 video services, Little Star, Jaunt, Lens, and obviously YouTube now has 360 support on PlayStation 4 as well and PlayStation VR. So they're great opportunities if you're interested in putting linear 360 content through. Those are great people to talk to about getting them on there. But there's also different types of content as well that, I mean, this particular one, Invasion, is actually available as 360, but actually on PlayStation 4, it's a fully interactive application. So this is, rather than coming through a 360 video service, this is available as a downloadable item on our own store, and it's actually game engine, if you like. So rather than it just being 360, you can actually move your head around inside the experience. So again, that's another option for people who are doing things that need that level of functionality. But one thing that's important to note for PlayStation is that a lot of our gamers, a lot of our VR users, they do play the games, and all of the games support head tracking. It's actually a requirement on our platform to support the head tracking because we see it as a really important feature. So as such, we have this environment where most of our players are really used to being able to move their head and the content responding. So you tend to find that when it comes to 360 content, they can be a little bit more preferable to have this kind of thing where they can move the head around in the space because they're just not used to not having the head movement sometimes compared to mobile. So that's just something to be aware of on that front as well. We also have documentary type content, so there's Viri, a new application that's come out where they're showing 4K videos on there as well, and they're doing episodic stuff. We have documentary content, so this app, Apollo 11, which is kind of quite educational in a lot of ways as well, but it's actually all CGI, so you get to experience space mission, but you're sat behind the controls and you're participating in that whole thing, which is a great way to experience it and really high value. But also there's movie-related content as well, where we're seeing a lot of this promotional side of things where people are obviously wanting to use virtual reality as a way to get people interested in their content and point at other forms of media. So the Martian VR experience isn't the full movie, obviously, it's a small element of it where you get to experience riding around on the planet and things like that on Mars in the buggy and those kind of elements, but just gives you a snapshot of that. And it's great, again, it's kind of like the ability to suddenly teleport yourself into a theme park all themed around this movie IP that you really love, and yet you can experience it firsthand for yourself. So that's quite powerful stuff. We also, from our own Sony Pictures, we have Ghostbusters VR, which does the same sort of thing. And again, you can get slimed by Slimer, which is quite interesting. But a great piece of content, and again, supports movie-related elements as well. We have well-being content, which was kind of a new field for us, really, on PlayStation. So this one called Perfect, what it basically does is a bit like virtual tourism, but rather than it being image-based, again, it's computer-generated, so it's all CGI, but it lets you go to a handful of amazing locations, really aspirational locations, but really just for relaxation. So you can go there and just, you know, sit on your sofa, put the headset on, and just be on a beach or be in the mountains somewhere, and just take 5 out of life sometimes and just go, this is brilliant. I'm just teleported here, I didn't have the travel, great, have a bit of a break, and then get back and do something else. But it's been created for that kind of purpose, and it's quite interesting to see this kind of content now, and it's quite a popular area. And then the similar things being done with music now. So this was initially a bit like the Perfect type idea, where you're in an aspirational location, but in this case, you choose a music track from a selection of many or your own music, and the whole environment comes alive in time with the music and is fully interactive with the music. So all sorts of amazing visual effects can be brought up and things like that. So again, can be quite relaxing or just quite stimulating, but it's an interesting way to experience music. And there's many other features in that particular title where you do very different things as well, with music always as a backdrop, some quite creative. And from my own team, we created the Joshua Bell VR experience. This was initially a bit of R&D where we wanted to see, can we create the feeling that you're having a very close performance by a real celebrity, and it's very believable. So we went out and we filmed Joshua Bell performing a violin piece in full 360 3D. But again, we had this problem that when we tried it on PlayStation VR, a lot of people commented, oh, I can't move my head around though, I can't move my head around. And particularly because all these things were very, very close. Now, normally when you make 360 content, especially in 3D, you try to avoid things coming very close because obviously you can't move your head around, so the parallax doesn't work. But we'd had these things very close because we wanted a very close experience. So we actually then spent time crafting this content and actually putting it into context of a real environment. So we remodeled a lot of the world using geometry, and then applied the 360 video to that, and then got rid of all the any parallax artifacts and things like that to create a full 360 3D video where you could actually move your head around in that space. And it actually won loads of awards, and is seen, so far I think it's been reported as possibly the best piece of VR video in existence on any platform. To give you an idea, I mean, it's obviously difficult to show here, but I'll show you a video of it so you can get some idea. So again, this is all 360 3D video, but you can see how I can move the camera towards him and away from him. And again, this way, all these elements here have got parallax, you can see behind them properly. This is taken straight out of the PlayStation 4. And as he does his performance, again, I can move the camera closer to him, further away from him, and all the background stays correct. You know, the parallaxes are all correct. All the objects feel like they truly exist in the space. And it's quite an amazing experience to have. It's all free on PlayStation VR, so you've got access to PlayStation VR. I encourage you to download it and try it out for yourself and see what you think. But also, so that covered kind of like what it's like to capture performance. But there's other interesting ways this has been taken. So Sony Music actually made this Carry Me experience from Kygo. So this was taking his music and applying the equivalent of, let's say, so it's like making a VR music video, so a completely different type of experience, and it was all CGI and interactive and things like that as well. So it carries you through an unfolding world in time with the music, and almost has this narrative that goes along with it. And again, you get to see stylized versions of Kygo there doing his performance and things like that, but it's all a very stylistic approach that they took to this. But the interesting thing was, I mean, I've played this content to a few people now, and a lot of people have commented afterwards that they loved it and often wanted to watch it several times over, just straight after, one after the other. But afterwards, they maybe hear it on the radio, the song on the radio, and they say, you know, when I hear it on the radio, I'm back there. I just remember like I've been on holiday. That's how they kind of equate it. It's kind of like they say, the way I recall it was like I was somewhere, like I was at a location last time I heard it, and it brings back these memories, is the way they kind of equate that, which is much more powerful than what they normally talk about for normal music videos. So it's quite clear that there's something special in this space, and music could be a really good way to progress more interesting types of VR content. So for anyone who's interested in getting on the PlayStation platform and creating content for PlayStation, there's a few ways to do this. So if you want to create content that's interactive and maybe uses computer-generated imagery and things like that rather than it just being linear 360, best thing to do is do a Google search for PlayStation partners, and then you'll find this URL, and then just click on that and you're there, and you can go through the whole process and become a PlayStation partner, and then you can create content and all the rest of it. That's the easiest way to do it. It's a lot easier than me having to ask you to type that URL in, which is a bit complicated. So that's the best way to become a content partner if you want to create high-end content. If you're more looking at just getting 360 content on there and you're targeting multiple platforms and things like that, then the best way to go really is our content aggregators. So talk to these guys, and that'd be brilliant because they can get you on other platforms too, and they can deal with, I think as people have talked about in previous presentations, they can deal with making sure that they do a lot of the legwork for you. You don't necessarily have to be a PlayStation partner there because they can do that for you. So that was a bit about our content side in the non-game space, so still a bit of time left. So we'll look a little bit towards where I can see some of the future elements going now as well. So one key thing I think is going to be a big area is new ways to create content. And I think we've already seen that video game type tools, what were traditionally built to be game engine tools, are actually quite mature now because they've been game engine tools for a very long time and have really improved the ability for people to make games very efficiently and de-skilled them in a lot of ways as well. So the most popular ones are probably Unreal and Unity, but there are other ones available as well, so it's worth having a good look around. But I can really see a world in which these types of tools are used by many different industries to create virtual reality content in particular, whether it be games or non-game, because they're brilliant tools for making interactive content. At the end of the day, VR is inherently something that benefits from the levels of interaction that you can offer. But I think that's also going to influence the production processes. The way I kind of imagine the future, and this might be, I don't know how far I'm looking ahead here, but certainly several years away, of production process could be that maybe when we're making a new piece of content, whether that be something that's targeting television or whatever it would be. So let's take a drama as an example. You actually capture the performances of all your actors, and maybe that's motion captured, and then their likenesses are recreated, and you're actually putting all that data into one of these game engine type tools, and you're getting the entire performance, all the audio, all the animations, everything into this one central place. And once you've done that, once it's all exists digitally as a complete piece, you can actually choose where to put the cameras later. You can choose how you want the lighting later. You can do all that as a post-production activity. But the fundamental element then that you get that's a big benefit is you can choose then any level of export process you like. You can make it for a TV-based thing, a movie-based thing, just render it at a much higher fidelity as an offline process. Choose where you want the camera to be for every individual shot, and you can change them at your heart's content. If you don't like the shot, just put the camera somewhere else, render it out again, it's fine, you can just do that. So everything becomes much more like a traditional animated piece, effectively, in that regard. So you can churn out TV-related things or movie-related things or do multiple whatever you want in that space. Equally, you could just make 360 videos out of the thing to target mobile platforms too. Or you could make something where it's actually interactive and using the game engine tech itself. And we're already seeing people starting to do these kind of approaches now using these game engine tools, but equally people are also using previs tools and taking them that little bit further now. So it's pushing from both angles. It's taking it from starting here and turning it into that, then starting there and pushing it that way. So both of these different types of tool sets all seem to be targeting that same sort of goal. So I can certainly see that as a tangible opportunity for several different types of content going forward in how we could create a centerpiece animation, if you like, that we then spawn all these different content options out of for efficiency. There's new ways to share content too. This is an example of just an R&D project we had, but basically this is someone playing a virtual reality game, and you can see the game world that they're in. They're interacting with this game world, but at the same time you can actually capture them from a third-person perspective and then they can share that video or image or whatever they want of them being inside this game with their friends or whoever they want to do, or you can use it at trade shows to show off how the content feels, where you can really see how someone is inside the game and really understand their movements and what they're actually doing and what experience they might be getting from a more conventional perspective. So that's another area about how we can share content that's quite interesting. And also new ways to experience content. So I don't know if any of you saw the ATP tennis finals at the O2 Arena, and we had a project there with Sony Professional and Sony Interactive Entertainment where they actually captured the footage. They were filming live the actual tennis game itself, but you could then experience it in virtual reality. So you were sat in a virtual reality like VIP booth, effectively, what felt to be overlooking the court. So you had the best seat in the house from that perspective. You had your own environment to exist in that was all CGI, but yet all this was actually 4K video. So, and it looked truly realistic. So you kind of felt like you were just overlooking it. But at the same time, you had additional things that you could interact with. So you could call up any degree of statistics that you wanted. You had the tool in this world where you could say, I want a screen here that's got a replay. I want a screen here that's got their performance statistics. I want to look up some details about the players. I want to choose, rewind this replay myself and choose where it's at. So there's a whole suite of functionality there that you could choose to do over the top of this content while still feeling like you're at this location as well. And you take that technology forward and you kind of think, well, you could use this for all sorts of things, live music, any sport, overselling the best seat in the house to multiple users around the world who don't have to travel to a venue. It's a huge, huge opportunity for what can be done with content in the future for virtual reality. Also, when we think about the big screen experience, when we think about just content that's been tailored for cinema type screens or TV screens and things like that, this can give us some new opportunities too. So, for example, rather than, because you've got the screen in virtual reality anyway, why don't you use the rest of the space, and bring some of the elements of what was going on this screen, maybe using metadata, into the environment around you too. So in this case, it's a snowy world. It could be snowing in my room. I could have snow on the ground. I could be appearing to be sat in a snow-covered chair. I could have the same sky in the world. I could continue the road beyond there. I could do a multitude of things that that complements an existing piece of content that wasn't tailored for virtual reality, but adds some virtual reality elements to it in a 4D way. So that's a great area as well that could take a lot of historic content forward. And also sharing these experiences. So again, talking about conventional content and this virtual cinema space that we have, well, why not bring your friends along as well? Why can't I be sat there watching this content and then my friend who lives 200 miles away appears next to me on a virtual sofa and we can watch the same piece of content together and we can comment on it and talk to each other on it and have a social experience just as if we were in the same space, but all facilitated through virtual reality. And we did some experimentation with social play ourselves. We showed this piece at a game developers conference I think about a year or so ago now. But this was quite interesting because it's put a multitude of things in there in terms of what you can do socially. So in this one, this was a bunch of people all together in the virtual space, all interacting with different things at the same time and having fun together. We put in mechanics whereby their hands were used to express their emotions. So you can see this guy's shaking his fist, so his face instantly goes to a grimace. There's guys here doing different things. I think that guy there was talking, so his mouth's opening. So you can see that there's so many things you can do to add value to the social side, and you could put this into any context. You could have them around a cinema content piece. You could have them doing anything you wanted, really, in terms of this, playing a sport, whatever it would be. So the opportunities in terms of social is very, very strong. And when you do these kind of activities and you actually played these social experiences, they're really powerful. So I think social is going to be a huge, huge element for virtual reality. And I think it's one of them areas that we should think about. And if we think about content creation, we should always think that maybe in the future, how can I consider a social element to this that would be significant and make sure that we're going on that path? Because I think a lot of VR experiences are going to have social elements in them longer term. So that's pretty much everything I was going to talk about, but I wanted to bring it back to the idea of obviously PlayStation virtual reality is something in the home, and you can see how some of these elements really do support that. The social side is a really big thing that's emphasized by the home, and the idea about being in the same room where you would typically be used to consuming the high-end content, watching movies and things like that. Again, all these things really support the idea of these kind of things existing on the PlayStation VR platform. So that's enough from me, I think. I've talked long enough now. I'm going to be available in the room next door if anyone wants to ask me any questions after this. Thanks very much for listening.